Good evening and welcome to True Dougman Encounters. I'm your host, Marvin Allen. If you or anyone that you know of have had a sighting and you would like for me to tell it on my channel, then please contact me at Marvin Allen True Encounters. I would love to hear from you. Before we get into this first encounter, I would like to say I hope that each and every one of y'all are doing okay. A lot of things going on. Still working on my laptop. Still trying to get it together. I have a few people that's helping me out. So hopefully in the coming weeks, it should be up and running. But until then, I'm going to give it to y'all like I've been giving it to y'all. I'm been doing it on my phone. So I haven't been having no problems with that lately. So this is the way I'm going to give it to y'all. A little bit about this Doug man thing. I was talking to one of my subscribers the other day, and we was talking about certain things. He said that he believed that some of these creatures that the government have captured is tagged. That means they got a device on them, so that means they could track them. But you got some of them that's still rogue and that's still wild, And he believed, that when killings start coming in of a human, then they would come in and take care of the situation. Because I did hear the episode on Jeffrey about the government agent. And, the things that he was saying. Some people believe him and some people don't. Who am I to judge? I don't know if he's telling the truth. And I don't know if he's lying. So I'm not going to judge that man on what he say. But he was letting people know a lot of things about these creatures. Basically, the big three, He was letting a lot of people know about these things. And I think that the public need to be aware of these creatures. I know it's all about money and all that, but they still need to be aware about these creatures. Now, I talked to another subscriber who is not that far from Taylor, Mississippi, and he invited me to come down because he know some hot spots down there. Now, mind you, my team just went down there, a few months ago down there to do a little bit of investigation. But he invited us to come down there again because he know specific spots where we are guaranteed to have encounters with these creatures and these cryptids. He said, now, these particular creatures down there, he said, man, they terrible. They mean. They feisty. They don't really want you in the area. So basically, I would want to watch them from afar because I wouldn't want nothing to happen to me or none of my team members. So hopefully in the future, we can make another trip down there and see how everything goes with that. Now, we can get into this first encounter. Now, in this first encounter, it happened in Carroll County. And the guy that I talked to, he owns a lot of land out there. He got corn. He just got all kind of vegetables out there. So he said one Saturday afternoon, he was out riding on his tractor, just riding around, looking at things. And he said he was near his cornfield. And he said something caught his eye over there. Now, he said this particular day wasn't no wind blowing. He said it was a beautiful, beautiful afternoon, So he said he looks over in the cornfield and he said he could see the stalks, moving. And they was moving, they were going a straight line and then they would zigzag and he didn't know what it was. He didn't know if it was, some kind of deer or something like that running through the cornfields. He said he really didn't know. So he's looking and he watching this thing just run through the cornfield. So he set up on his tractor. And he said when he set up on his tractor, he yelled out, "Who's out there? I'm armed. I got a gun and I will shoot." So he's looking. He said when he said that, the movement stopped in his cornfield. He said the movement just ceased. He said so he's still watching and he looking. He said when he looked, he noticed something dark peek up out of the cornfield. He said the first thing that he noticed that came up was two large pointed ears. So he thinking to himself, I know that ain't no bear. This is what he said was going through his mind. He said, I know it's not a bear. What is it? So he looking. He said, and as he's watching it, these ears started to walk. Or it's like it was walking, but they was moving in a horizontal line. Just moving. So he's watching this thing. He's watching these ears. He said all of a sudden, as he was looking at these ears, he said they stopped. He said, and when they stopped, he said them ears started to raise up and he looked. And when he looked, he said to him, it looked like a black wolf. It turned, looked in his direction, and then it ducked back down. And then it started running through the cornfields again. But it ran in the opposite direction, not towards him, the opposite direction. So it ran through the cornfields. So he got back down on his tractor. He went back in the house. So he said he's sitting in the house. He's contemplating now because he don't know what he saw. He said if that was a Doug, shouldn't no Doug be that big or a wolf? He said because the stalks on his corn was 7.5 to 8 feet in height. He said there's no way a Doug or a wolf is that damn big that it should be over top of these corn stalks. So he in a house, he contemplating. So he didn't know if he should call somebody or if he should find out what it was. He said, so about 2 days later, he went out again. He said, but this time he was walking. He said, so he was walking, just at the line of where his corn started. So he's walking down. He said, and as he's walking down, now mind you, he said he's armed. He said he's armed. So as he's walking down where the cornfield started, he's just listening. So he's walking, and he said when he was walking, he said he can hear something moving in the cornfield. So he said he backs up from away where the cornfield started. So he's looking. He said he can hear something, but he don't see anything. So he thinking in his mind, is it that black thing that looked like a wolf again? Or a Doug? This is what he telling me because he really don't know what it is. He said, so he's backed up and he stood and he's looking in the cornfield. But he can't see nothing because the cornfield is so thick. But he can hear something moving. And this time, when he heard moving, he said he can hear steps. Boom, boom, boom. Boom. He said he hears steps like it's something walking on two legs. He said whatever this sound was, it's something walking on two legs. Because it's taking steps like a human would take. Boom. He said, but these was loud. You can hear it when it hit the ground. This is what he said. He said you can hear these steps when it hit the ground. He said, so whatever it is had to be heavy. He said, so he's watching. He says he's yelled out again. Who's out there? Get off my property. I'm armed and I will shoot to protect myself. This is what he said. He said, so he's still watching. He still hears these footsteps walking. He said, so he back up further, away from where the cornfield starts at. And he still's looking. He looks. He say the same thing he said again. Who's ever out there, get off my land. He said, so he watches again. He said this time he hear those steps. The steps sound like it's coming towards him. He said, but this time they didn't sound boom, boom. He said he could see the corn stalks moving, but he don't see nothing. He said, so he's watching, he's looking right at these corn stalks. He said, and then he can see these corn stalks parting. He said he could actually see them parting. And when he looked, he said something come into vision, a dark. He said this thing was just pitch black, dark. He said when it came into vision and it parted out between those stalks, he said it looked like that black wolf he seen a few days before, standing up in the cornfield. Now he said this thing is down now on all fours. He said this thing was huge because it made a path through the corn stalks. He said this thing was huge and it was wide. He said this thing was massive. So he said this thing comes to the edge of the cornstalk and it peeks out and it looks right at him. He said, and when this thing peeked out and it looked right at him, he took his gun out, his holster, and he cocked it back. He had a .357 and he cocked it back because he didn't know what this thing was or if this thing would try to attack him. So he cocks the gun back he cocks the hammer back on the gun. So he watching this creature. This creature it's just right there, like it's sizing him up, like it's waiting for him to make a move, the wrong move. But he thinking in his mind, this thing is so big, if I shoot it, I don't think I'm going to kill it or hurt it. He said this thing was humongous on all fours. He said, and then this thing on all fours had to be at least 4 to close to 5 feet. He said this thing was tall on all fours. He said, but he got this hammer cocked back on his gun. So he's saying if he had to shoot, he said he was going to shoot that day. Because if somebody had to go, he was going to do everything in his power to make sure that it was that thing that he was looking at. So he's still watching this creature now. This creature's still looking at him, eyeing him up. He said, then this creature did something that it still haunts him to this day. He said this creature looked it like it stretched its limbs. I'm talking about the legs and the shoulders, because he said that's what this thing had, shoulders. He said it stretched it. He said then this thing stood up on his back legs. Now he said he know what the hell he saw in his cornfields that was so damn tall. He said so he watched this thing stretch and then stand up on his back legs. Said this thing was humongous. He said this thing was tall. He said this thing had massive shoulders, long arms with huge hands, with claws. Now, mind you, he said this in the afternoon. So it's light outside, and he said he could see this creature clear as day. He said this creature had hands with claws. He said, but his body came down and it tapered nice. Like the waist was kind of small, he said. Said, but the legs on him was just huge, where the thighs would be on a person. He said, but it had canine legs. He said it had the pointy ears, a long snout like a shepherd. He said, but this creature wasn't all completely black. He said it looked like it had brown in it. Or either that was some dirt that had been rolling in. He said, but it looked like it had brown in it. So he watching this creature, and it's just standing there. He said this creature was just cut up. I mean, it had muscles and all that. And he said you could see it. He said the hair on this creature wasn't real long. He said it looked like a dog, but it still resembled a human. And when he was telling me that, he said, you understand what I'm trying to say? I say, yeah, I understand, because a lot of people say that. So he watching this creature, and it's just standing there. He said, then he pointed the gun at this creature and started backing up. He said, when he pointed that gun at this creature, he said this thing had to have some type of intelligence. He said, when he pointed that gun at this creature, it moved like it knew what the fuck a gun was. And that messed his head up when it moved. And he said in his mind, this thing must know what a gun is. It must know what this can do to him if it hit him. He said, so when that creature moved, he said he showed his teeth and wrinkled up his lip and his nose, how you pull it back. He said, and then it growled. He said the growl was so powerful, it just shook him. He said it shook him to his core when it growled at him. He said it was a long growl. It wasn't short. Now, mind you, this sighting wasn't long. He said, but it was like he was in a tunnel vision. He said it seemed long. He said, but it wasn't no longer than a minute. He said, when that creature moved and it growled at him, it turned and it walked back into the cornfield. He said he can hear this thing drop down, his hands hitting the earth, and just he could see the cornfield just moving all out the way. I mean, he just parted everything and just took off and left. He said he still had the gun pointed in that direction. He said then he just snapped out of it. Put the gun down, put it in his holster, and went back in the house. He sat in the house, and when he went in the house, his wife asked him, she said, "What was you doing out there all that time?" He said, "I was just walking, checking on things." He said because that day when he saw that black creature stand up out there, he said he did tell his wife he seen something. Said, "I think I seen some stray dogs or wild dogs out there, something." He said because in his area, by he owns so much land, he have seen dogs come through there, or a coyote or two. He did tell her that, but he didn't tell his wife what he saw. So he said the last time that he seen this creature was about 2 weeks later. He said he was in the house. He said now his house, you can go out back, and he had this like a screening porch for like during the summertime, the sun won't, beam on him and stuff like that. So he had a screening porch. Said so he was sitting out there. So he said when he was sitting, he just kept his eye out on that cornfield. And he's watching it. And he said when he was watching this cornfield on this day, he said he could see movement again. He said, but this time, he sees it in multiple spots. He see the cornfield moving, straight, zigzagging. So he said in his mind, it must be more than one of these creatures. So he watching these things move all over the place. So he stood up. He opened the screen door. He goes out there. Now, mind you, he said he always keep his gun on him, no matter what. So he goes out there. He takes his gun out his holster again. He said this time he shoots in the air. Boom, 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 boom. His wife runs out there. "What are you doing? What's wrong?" He said, "No, I think I seen some of them wild dog coyotes out there and they're in the cornfield." She said, did you shoot at them or what? He said, "No, I just shot in the air just to try to scam." So she said, "Please, you scared me. I didn't know what was wrong." So she went back in the house. He stood out there and he still watched those cornfields. He said, but after he shot, the movement stopped. He said he stood there for about 30 minutes. No movement. So he don't know where these creatures went at. He didn't see the cornfield move no more, nothing. It just messed his head up. So he went in the house, locked the door, ate dinner. They went in the room and he sat down. And he said, he looked at his wife. He said, "What I told you today or the other day wasn't the truth." He said, "I want to be honest with you." He said, "Because in all the times that we've been married, I never lied to you. And I don't want to start." He said, "Now don't think I'm crazy or nothing like that before I tell you this." She said, "I would never think that." And he told her what he saw. And at first she looked at him shocked. But he said eventually she believed him. And he said, anytime you go outside, make sure I'm with you and you are armed. Because I don't know what these things are, where they come from. He said, but from what I seen, these things are built to kill. He said, I know this thing could have killed me that day. That gun wouldn't have did nothing to it but make it mad. He said, just promise me that you'll be armed and you will not go far. And she promised him that. He said that's the last time that he has seen these creatures. He said that he had heard about Bigfoots and seen them when he was younger. He said, but these things, he said, these things take the cake. He said, because these things will kill anything in its way. So when he gave me that encounter, man, I asked him a few more questions. I said, well, what do you think it was? And he said, to be honest, I don't know. He said on one hand, it looked like a dove, but on the other hand, it looked human. Like, you know, he said, but the hands freaked him out. The eyes freaked him out. The teeth, he said they was just so long. And then he said they was just sharp. You know, like needle sharp. You know. And I asked him, I said, did you smell anything when you was out there? He said, now that you bring it up, he said, I did smell the creature when it came out of the cornfield. And it was just sitting there on all fours before it stood up. He said, I did smell it. He said it had a foul smell to it. It had a smell that I can't really describe. Like rotten meat, something dead. It smelled like a dirty dog. He said it just smelled like all that combined. He said, but he don't never want to see those things again. And I had talked to him about a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him, have he had any more trouble, you know, with these creatures? He said no. He said, but they damaged a lot of his cornfield up, you know. So he said he lost a lot of money during this time. He said, but he don't know where they came from or where they coming from, if they migrating from somewhere else up through there. These things he don't know. So I told him if he had any questions and, you know, he wanted to talk about it, you know, the information that I get, I can pass it on to him. Because I told him I'm not an expert in this field. This is something I just love to do. I love to help other people. So I said, if I can get more information on these creatures, then I'll be happy to pass it on to you. So that was his encounter. I hope you like it. I hope you enjoy it. Like, comment, and I'll see you on the next True Encounters. Good night.